this is-ought problem, which is not necessarily so much of a logical problem, but rather one about how to justify certain moves from the descriptive to the normative. What could be much more of a problem in the social sciences, I wanted at least to mention this to you here, is what is referred to as thick concepts by Bernard Williams, Gabriel Abend, whom you know from the first lectures, also wrote an interesting article about this if you're interested. So thick concepts are like terms like cruel or welfare, which have, if you think about it, both a descriptive and an evaluative component. Yeah, so it's difficult to separate the two, which would mean that if social sciences use a lot of these terms in their language, then the social sciences themselves may have problems to be a purely descriptive discipline. Yeah. Okay, but this much about is and ought, which, yes, becomes also a topic through evolutionary theory that many of 19th century liberals are defended, and we will revisit this theory as well in 20th century system theory, which has also a leaning towards evolutionary theory. So let's move on now to the question of what kind of social science most liberals in the 19th century probably envisioned. And John Stuart Mill's book here, The System of Logic, is probably the treatise that answers this question most explicitly. Yeah? When he writes that the science of human nature falls far short of the standard of exactness now realized in astronomy, but there's no reason that it should not be as much a science as tidology is, or as astronomy was when its calculations had only mastered the main phenomena, but not the perturbations, unquote. So yes, tidology refers to something like the science of the tides at the time. And yes, you can gather from this quotation, John Stuart Mill, liberals of the time, also had the idea to make the social sciences, that is here the science of human nature, eventually at least a copy of the natural sciences, which many of the 19th century thinkers still knew in a much earlier stage as we did. So natural sciences also had sort of a childhood they had to go through. So we need to give the social sciences a little more time. And it might also be that they are not as exact eventually. So a little bit like meteorology nowadays. But yeah, they will get there eventually. That was the optimism also of the time. So John Stuart Mill then also sees empirical psychology as the basis of what was also called the moral sciences of the time. The subject matter of that science would be individual characters, right? So think about different characters depending on different climates, for instance. Yeah, that was the topic of the time, but also the subject matter then including whole societies, right? So why is England of the time richer than France? John Stuart Mill also is associated with being something of the founder of that rational actor, at least heuristic. That is, to understand actors, it makes sense to suppose that they have their self-interests and that they follow their self-interests in a rational way, such that a practical syllogism also could be an explanation of human behavior. Then along a different dimension, this would imply also that the social sciences in this view are value neutral, right? They can be organized as the physical sciences, but in Mill's writings, at least, and I think also many of his fellow liberals, they were also informed by an ethical utilitarianism, right? And that was defined by Mill, for instance, here as the happiness, that is the sole end of human action, and the promotion of it, the test by which to judge all of human conduct. End of quote. So yeah, Mill's version of utilitarianism is happiness being then the most important indicator of whether, for instance, to recommend a certain reform or not. But yeah, this kind of ethical theory then is distinct in Mill's view from the value-neutral enterprise of the social sciences. Last but not least, on the political system level, then Mill sees the democracy as increasing freedom, but interestingly also as decreasing freedom, because it liberates all of the others in the society that then increase the social influence, for instance, through custom, traditions, or norms on the individual. And that there might be even something like the tyranny of majorities, so that basically a democratically free society got rid of the old rulers, but has a new dictator, which is then the crowd. So you see already in these early liberal writings that there's, let's say, a leaning also of liberalism in favor, let's say, of at least an expert democracy, or a technocracy, if you want, and the restriction of, like, let's say, the principle of a democracy for all, something that comes back also in neoliberalism. According to Mill, here he follows probably Smith, or even more radically, then state intervention should only, and like really only if and only if, right, be allowed if states use their intervention to prevent harm to others, and also as self-protection. So basically self-protection against suicides, for instance. All right, so let me conclude with applying the different dimensions that theories may differ along, which I introduced in the first theory lectures, to the liberal theory that, as we learned it now. And I mean, there are different variations. You saw there different kinds of utilitarianism, for instance, different degrees to which political state intervention is justified or not. But I think there's something like a common denominator which justifies this little tableau here. So when it comes to epistemology, the way that social sciences should gain knowledge, these liberal theories follow the idea basically of copying the natural science model of generating knowledge, which is empiricist, right? It's against metaphysics of any sort, and objectivist, right? So it's not about writing about emotions or subjective mental states. It's about finding out objective facts. So this is the kind of epistemology. When it comes to explanations, I mentioned this for Mill's writings. It's about applying causal explanations and following the regularity theory of causality. So David Hume's idea that causes are basically there if and only if basically the token cause events regularly follow then the token effects of similar event types. Methodologically, this position that liberals defend can also be referred to as methodological monism, right? Meaning monism, like mono, coming from one. One size fits all. The methods of the natural sciences are the methods of the social sciences. A second position methodologically is individualism, right? So that the individuals are the entity that should be studied in the social sciences or psychology, also moral sciences, as they were called at the time. The dominant explanandum, so what should be explained in these theories, is probably the question, what produced this economically and democratically progressive new order? What produced this industrial society that followed then the militant society in the Spencer terms? And yeah, the answer is basically sought at the individual level first. So they are rational actors, right? The homo economicus actors that engage in trade, that design also efficient institutions such as contract law or private property laws in order to pursue their own interests and through the invisible hand mechanism produce this new order. We also saw that in general, liberals think of social science as a value-neutral enterprise, but most of them being philosophers, they also defend ethical theories, most of all utilitarian ethics of some kind, that is, actions and, let's say, state reforms are justified with their positive consequences in terms of happiness, for instance, for the many. Ontologically, so what kind of entities does this theory presuppose? This theory is definitely atomistic in character. That is, society is nothing else but the set of individuals that constitute it. Individuals are most important. I think that the 19th century liberals disagree a little bit on whether individuals should be the ultimate unit of analysis of the social sciences. And Mill was of that idea that they are not reducible to physical matter. So it makes sense to keep a social scientific language as well to describe social beings, human beings. This was one position, but there were also positions that would have said that biology, the science of the late 19th century, is the ultimate science or physics that should reduce then even the mental states held by individuals. Last but not least, many of our theories come along with a certain view of what human beings are or what they should be. In relation to animals, for instance, or inert matter. And we saw that from the beginnings of Adam Smith's writings, the dominant view of human beings is that of what we call nowadays the homo economicus, that is, the rationally calculating, self-interested actor that sort of maximizes his or her gains in the marketplace. All right, so with that little summary tableau, let's conclude this lecture on the liberal tradition in sociology. Have a great day.